Bam.
This is Natasha Daniels, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I have to watch the right camera because I'm on the road, and so my setup is a little bit different today. But hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you sending me the book, and I'm excited to talk to you. Well, yes, I mean, I'm interested in talking to you about grief because it's something that, as an adult, I'm 53. I'll be 54 in a couple of months. Um, I'm losing people. Sometimes every month I'm losing someone. They'll come in a bunch, and it gets heavy. And heck, I'm an adult. I've lost a lot of
Mhm.
people in my life, and then you think about kids and losing their parents and everything. So I thought, well, let's have this conversation and let's start to learn how we do better at this stuff.
Yeah, because I do feel like grief is almost a taboo topic in Western culture.
Yeah. Why is that?
I wish I knew. I think more research needs to be done around it because I know I've been in other cultures and they just grief is like death is part of their culture, and here
Yeah.
you're experiencing a loss, especially of like a parent or partner or one of your kids or your
Mm.
sibling, and it's like you have the plague. People don't know what to do about that or what to say.
Are you familiar with Atul Gawande's work on being mortal and other books that he's written?
No, I should check it out.
It's real interesting. He's an oncologist by trade, and he came to the realization that he, as a doctor, was always trying to fix a problem that was often unfixable, or the odds on fixing it were impossibly long, incredibly expensive, horribly painful. And he started to change how he advised his clients and saying, hey, one of the things you can't do is let nature take its course. And
Mhm.
all of this turned into how we deal with the reality of our impending, agedness, and then transition into no age.
Mhm.
But it's a book that it's hard to even get my friends to read.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd read it.
Yeah. Well, you should. Everybody should. It's called Being Mortal. I'll put a link into it right now, though. Look down below. There's the link for the Grief Rock. Well, let's talk specifically about your book. Why did you write it, and what's it about?
Well, I'm a child therapist, so I specialize in helping kids with anxiety and OCD, and that was my world before my husband suddenly died. But my husband was an FBI agent. He was doing a night training and pulled his Achilles tendon, and it seemed like nothing came hobbling in. It was like we kind of made fun of it, and he had an outpatient procedure, surgery, and then he was just recovering at home, and went to bed. Everything seemed fine, and I couldn't wake him up in the morning, and he passed away of a blood clot. And so
Mm.
at 42, it was just overnight. You know, the world was good, and then our world was upside down. 3 kids, 9, 11, and 18 at the time. So
Oof.
it's still is a lot
Mm.
to handle.
My brother took his own life 2 years ago, and he's got two daughters that are, like just in their 20s. And when this occurs, and then a young son who's middle school, and look, we're all going to wrap our arms around all of them and the family, and of course my sister-in-law, but you just don't know what's coming for that
Mhm.
that pubescent kid in middle school. He's doing great so far, and hopefully he'll continue to do that. But grief is just, it's relentless, and it seems like it takes its time at getting to where it's going to get to. But you're on that ride, you're gonna go there.
Yeah, you don't there's no exit on that ride, unfortunately. And once you realize that, I think that's part of the journey is like the acceptance of this is horrible
Hmm.
and we're gonna get through this. And really there's people can die at any time. I think it just kind of it removes the veil of like this like protection that I
Yeah.
think we have this like facade that people die in a certain order, a certain age, and otherwise something about them. And I mean, and I would do that with my husband. He'd come home and tell me stories about someone at work, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's too bad they probably had a heart condition," or "Oh, that's too bad. They should have, been a little bit safer when they did that." And I would always find reasons why that wouldn't be us. And I think that's just what we do. It's human nature to say, um, that can't happen to us, and people
Mm.
die when they're old, which is unfortunately not the case.
Yeah. We live in an era where, again, I'm 53, so my grandfather, for example, there's 5 boys. 2 of them make it to about 18 and then muerta, gone. There's a baby that they don't even count. This is a baby that is
Wow.
born and dies, and they're like, that's just, you know, because that's how normal childhood or infant death was back then. This is in the 20s, in the 30s, but it, 3 boys survive. Ultimately, 3 died. They don't even count one. It's
Wow.
crazy how different it is 100 years later,
Mhm.
but we still have death.
We do. It's at an alarming rate, really. I mean, I didn't realize how common it was. I mean,
Mm,
1 out of 12 kids will experience a parent or a sibling dying before they're 18. And to me, that's crazy. If you expand it to their 20s, it doubles in
wow.
amount. And and so I think we think this is like a really like very specific narrow topic, but that's a pretty prevalent
Yeah.
statistic when you think about it.
I don't I don't know what the numbers are now for dying before you're 18, but so one of the things I like baseball, I'll talk about it. And people will say, if Babe Ruth played today, like,
Mhm.
yeah, but if your player today played and was born in 1895, was raised by 2 parents that were sort of not capable, either had him in a bar or had to send him off to an orphanage, a quarter of the kids from 1895 didn't make it to 18. It's,
That's
and then
crazy.
it's hard, right? And
Yeah.
so that familiarity with death, and the easiness here in the States compared to other places, yeah, it does kind of shield us from the reality that, people get cancer, people get hit by cars,
Mhm.
people have a predisposition to just, hey, this person had 28 years, not a thing you could do about it.
Yeah.
How do you live your life though, knowing that that monster is out there and not worried that it's gonna that you're cursed, right? Like if you have 3 or 4 people die, how do you avoid that?
Yeah, and that is hard. I feel like it's a weird gift in some really weird demented way because we all live like that. Like,
Mhm.
I am not unique, but I'm like gifted with the idea that I realize that we can all drop dead, which sounds horrible, but
Yeah,
it's literally our reality that
yeah.
sometimes there's nothing we can do to prevent a death and we may not even see it coming. And that's not sad. That is just the human nature. That is reality.
Mhm.
And so on
Yeah,
some level, it's really helped me live a more mindful life
yeah.
because and my kids live a mindful life because we realize on a very personal level that we may not have each other. And that is a reality that is not just our reality, it's everybody's reality.
Mhm.
But we kind of peek behind the curtain and now we recognize that that's true. And so I think um we shake things off a little bit easier. I don't get as upset about the traffic. I don't get as upset. Like I will, and then I'll zoom out and I'll be like, really honestly, how stupid
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah,
And
right,
so
yeah.
in a way, it's made life a lot more meaningful and
Mm.
lighter on some level.
How do you balance, today versus tomorrow? Because that's one of the things too, and how do you teach your kids that so they don't look, young boys are like, "The devil may care. I'm jumping off this bridge. I'm gonna do take all these chances," and then you add a little bit of psychological challenge or problems with authority, and it gets worse. Now you have a dead parent. It's like, "Oh my god, how do I guide my kids through this dangerous road?" And again, they're gonna be on that road no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, that is no one's gonna do that well. I think that's just really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
But having honest, transparent conversations with your kids is really important.
Mm,
My son is probably similar to your nephew's age. He's 14 now, was
mhm.
11 when his dad died, and not saying in my head, okay, well, that was 3 years ago. He's good to go. He's 14, um,
Right.
because they're weaving a story in their head of why that person died and how it was maybe their fault or their
Mm,
relationship with that person that left and um, every developmental stage it's growing, that story is growing,
mhm.
and helping craft that story or kind of going in there and helping the narrative uh, can help because I think you will get that risky behavior, that more impulsive behavior if you're not addressing some undercurrents that could be feeding it too.
Mm. Yeah, and how do you? especially in your case, how do you differentiate between being a parent and being the head shrinker? Get out of my head, mom, right? Like how do you deal with that? Because look, anytime you get into a challenging discussion with your kid, they're gonna throw that at you.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not fun to be my kid because they're always like, uh I mean, and they talk like therapists. I'm sure like that is not fun. And my oldest, who's 20 now, she really was kind of my guinea pig because she would say, like, I'm not your client, or like, stop, doing therapy in my head. And so I learned to like ask, do you
Yeah,
want me to listen, or do you want advice? And
yeah.
um really trying not to sound like a therapist, which is really hard to do.
Because you're in fact a therapist.
Yes. See, that is hard because I want to be their mom,
Right. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can't turn it off. Like, that's just how I speak to kids. So
Mhm.
some of it
How
is,
does the book inform all of this? I mean, it's a short book. You can read it in
yeah,
a short amount of time, like minutes.
yes. And I did that on purpose. I actually wanted it to be an adult coffee table book, but that
Mhm.
didn't happen. The publisher's like, no, you have to like, pick an age. And so I'm like, fine. Um, but the brain's not really processing. I couldn't read, I couldn't speak. Like,
Right.
it was very hard for me to process. And so I wanted a book that was super simplistic, that walked kids through the really physiological aspect of death. Like, it's hard
Mhm.
to eat, it's hard to sleep. You're going to feel good, and then you're going to be like knocked over. And people are going to be weird. They're going to be like, let's avoid that person, or why is she carrying that rock? And so um I wanted to put something out in the world that would actually almost kind of help navigate and normalize that experience for people.
This is one of those areas too where, again, having some wisdom and some experience, you can say you're going to go through the processes of grief, and you might even teach a kid, the steps, and you're like, but they don't go in an order. They kind of shake around on this snow globe, and then you're in the snow globe, and so you can say, okay, I accept it. Like, no,
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the stages of grief because I feel like grief is super messy. It's not linear. You may not experience all those things. You might experience things that are completely different. You might be
yeah,
hyperactive. You might be super um, aggressive. Like, it's going to show up at different ways, and you might feel all of that within an hour. And so
mm-hmm.
normalizing that is so important.
Yeah, yeah, and you may feel nothing. Now you have guilt because you
Yeah.
don't feel anything.
Yes.
As all of these challenges. How do you explain this to a kid who doesn't have like a kid can name 11 jobs and probably 5 emotions, right? Like, that's when their sophistication stops. I mean, they're smart and everything, but they just don't have the feel for like it's like teaching a kid how to drive a clutch. I can describe it, but until you and I get in the car and I scream at you and you scream back and you go, "Oh, I feel it," and then that's it, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it is kind of our knee-jerk reaction to wanna fix it, and so we wanna swoop in and we wanna make it better, uh, and one of the things that I learned is I don't have to know exactly what to say, because I don't like, people are saying weird things to me, and so it's just
Mhm.
saying, "This is hard, and I'm sorry that we have to go through this, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry that you have to live your life without, your dad," and just sitting in the validation part of it is really like the first thing. It's just, yeah,
Mm.
I'm not going to try to make this better. Like, yep, this sucks. It's horrible. And I'm sorry that we're going through it. And that's kind of refreshing when you're feeling that way, that there
Yeah.
are no answers. I'm not going to tighten this up and make it pretty for you. It
Yeah.
is what it is. Yeah.
It is what it is. It is. Yeah, here we are, and we're gonna
Yeah.
be here tomorrow. And you're gonna be the kid that lost his dad
Mhm.
early, like your whole life. Like that's the people that I know that are friends of mine who lost their parents in their teens, they're it's a different experience for them.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. It's weaved into to your being, because you're the kid that doesn't have a dad or a mom that's going to walk you down the aisle. You're the kid at school that didn't have a dad for daddy daughter dance. You're the kid that um, was different, and so it is.
Mhm.
It's kind of weaved to your story.
What do you do about that as a surviving parent? I mean, you can give them the books, you can have the grief rock, you can do all these things, but like those are just things you say. Like, what can you actually do?
And I think a lot of it is being compassionate to yourself and being transparent with your kids. We, on a concrete level, like, we talk together. Well, when
Mhm.
the first year was going and there were like all the holidays were coming, I would sit down with my kids and I didn't act like I knew everything. It was just like, all right, these are going to be hard. How do you guys want to handle this? Do you want to keep with our traditions the way that dad and I did, or do you want to make completely new ones? Is it too painful for us to have the exact same stuff that we do? And so we would
Mm,
make these decisions as a family so that I could give like my kids a voice in these things. And, during anniversaries, it's his birthday, it's his death day. How do you guys want to honor this? And so I kind of brought myself down a little bit. It's not like mom and then I'm like dictating. It's like, let's get through this together and let's walk through it. And that seems to be working so far.
Moms have a thing. You guys put your kids first, even at your own expense. And, when you're ready, your own love life can easily get pushed off until the last one graduates from high school and everything. How do you take care of that? How do you show them how to move on if you're, a mom and you're inclined to do everything for your kids and nothing for yourself? I mean, the next lady that does that's not going to be the last, right?
Yeah. And it's hard because I always tell people like I'm operating with one kidney because I feel like I don't have family or friends that are going to like swoop in and take my kids,
Right.
if something happens to me. So I'm always like, and initially I was really anxious to like drive without my kids or like if they were in school and I went to an appointment that was like an hour away, I thought, oh my gosh, what if I got in a car accident and no one would communicate with my kids? And so it does get really overwhelming.
Mhm.
But then having more of like a philosophical perspective on it that life will be what life will be. And it's important for my kids to see that I also have a life separate from them, that's really not healthy for them to see me living through them or living just for them. And
Mhm.
so, um, going and taking care of myself. And I let them know, like, oh, I have a therapy session for myself today. Or, I'm going to go walk with a friend. And I write it on the whiteboard, like, you have an appointment, you've got drum lessons,
Mhm.
and I'm going to therapy today. I do that purposely so that they can see that I have my own support and I'm taking care of myself. So, because if we don't model that, then they're going to grow up and be everybody else is important and I'm last because that's what was modeled for me.
Yeah. There's other points of view here too, or angles, I should say, or perspectives maybe. How do you allow your kids to be your kids and not be like, don't jump off that thing, don't do this, don't do that, and overprotect because of fear of losing somebody or your own inability to handle with them being, look, it's already hard to have teenagers, right?
It is so hard. Yeah.
So how do you
And if you've
add
had
in, yeah,
and you've had that if you've had that loss, you're like so afraid of having another loss. And so,
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
yeah, it's like this open wound and you're like, just don't touch it. I think being able to recognize that that's smothering. And so
Mm,
I'm not doing it perfectly. Like my 11-year-old will say, I'm going to go ride my bike around the neighborhood. And I'll be like, okay, go ahead, have fun. And then I pull up my phone as soon as she leaves and I pull up 360 and she has her phone so I can track her. Or
yeah.
my 20-year-old who's actually in LA in college.
Hmm.
Um, she's on 360. And so like I know that she's alive. I can see up, at 11 p.m. she went out for some reason. And I just get notifications. They know that we have to like life 360, but it's like letting them breathe and live, but a little peace of mind for me to be like, okay, like I know she's still alive.
Yeah. How did our parents do? At least, my era. Like you'd say, "Hey, I'm going to prom. Be back on Sunday." You're like, "Wait, what? Where do you go?" We'll go to the beach afterwards, and then the parents are like, "All right, see you later." The baby boomers just
I know.
kind of just let us go. They're like, "They'll be back or not. We'll see them or not."
I know. I know. Yeah. I wish I had that free will.
What do you think? And I don't want to get us off the main topic, but I think it is important here when we talk about smothering. Um, that ability to check in on your kid, to watch them on a camera in the house. This is, I don't think it's healthy, and I'm not saying moms, dads too, parents in general, and then it's one thing if you have an open communication, like, hey, let's all look out for one another, that kind of thing. But if you want privacy, here's how we do it. And also, by the way, here's that's a different thing than what's going on. There's a lot of people surveilling their kids, and I just don't
Yeah.
know if that's
Yeah.
good for anybody.
I don't think you want to make your kids paranoid that they think that like, Big Brother is watching in the house. Um, and I think, communicating with them, like if you are on an app, that you're able to track them, letting them know that this is what it's for, and it's for safety, and you can track me
Right.
too so that we're safe. But yeah, I know I did one time when my kids were little, tell them that we had cameras in the house because we have like a security system that's not active inside, but they're little things. And I'm like, when you guys argue, I'm going to go rewind the tape, and I thought
Yeah.
they thought I was kidding, but my older daughter was like, we always thought you were serious, mom. And I
See.
was like,
Yeah.
there's no tape.
Well, and then again, how do you prevent yourself from scratching your own itch that you shouldn't like? You have to allow your kid, even if it's uncomfortable. We're the parents. Like it's our job to absorb their freedom and tolerate it. And so it's way too easy to monitor the life out of them and not take care of ourselves, and just it's like unchecked, your friends have unchecked psychosis, like, I tend towards whatever, and they just keep going and never get themselves help. This It's one of those things that can exacerbate itself, and really, Pete would say, and I'm not a professional, Pete would say that that can damage your well-being over time.
Yeah, and definitely can be overwhelming. I mean, you don't really want too much information and data is a little overwhelming, like you need a
Yeah.
little breathing room for kids to be kids, for sure.
Yeah. And the other perspective is how your kids see you. You're the one with one kidney, you're the single parent. How do you let them know that you're going to be okay and able to manage, as we all fake it,
Yeah.
being a parent?
Yeah. Yeah, and being human, like
Hmm.
I didn't want to lie to my kids and say, I'm always going to be here because I really can't 100% guarantee that. And so
Yeah.
it's instead saying, I'm taking good care of myself. I'm going to the doctor. I'm being very preventative. I'm doing all the things I can. I'm very safe. Uh, and just letting them know that we all do our thing, and
Mm.
uh, that there's a plan in place if I'm not okay. That's okay as well. I you don't want to be too perfect and be put on this pedestal that's artificial. I think there's something really good about being human in front of your
Mm.
kids, but
Hmm.
not having them be your confidant or parentifying your kids. I was very
Right.
clear with my kids, especially my oldest who was 18 at the time, that you don't need to step in and be a parent. Um, because I think sometimes people feel a burden that they need to take care of you, and you really don't want to convey that, but you also don't want to be this superwoman or superman that you have no feelings and you're not really modeling your emotions.
Mm.
So it's this weird balance.
It is a weird balance. We're talking with, let me get everything set up here, Natasha. She wrote a book called The Grief Rock, and yeah, I think it's a great lesson as we talk about this taboo topic and death and everything else that comes along with it. And I put a link in for the book right there. And you know what I always say? Buddy read, grab it and do it with somebody else, your people in your coffee clutch or whatever it is. Take this book on, read it, and look, we all got to figure these things out. Even if we're advising someone from a third party perspective, right? That's the next perspective I was going to bring in, as I've realized as a person of words and a person with a lot of experience with death. It's one of my jobs in my little community is to have good counsel, is to be able to advise on how to write an obituary or speak at someone's feet. Like there's these other things that come with grief, and then your ability to play a role externally, like bringing a casserole is great, but also like, here is a way I can help. And instead of saying, if there's anything you need, like, this is what I
Mhm.
can offer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that people don't know what to say, but I I really appreciate when people would come in and just say, "Can I help you? Can I?" And then, you think it's a platitude, so you're like, "No, no, it's fine." And
Yeah.
there's a lot of pride. I mean, I have a lot of pride, and I don't wanna take help from people I don't know.
Right.
And when people would say, "Can I take your kids for you?" Or, "How about I
Yes.
have your kids sleep over?" Or, "Can I come and swing by and take your trash out?" That was amazing because then I
Yeah.
was like, "Well, actually, that would be really helpful." And so, yeah, that's a great way to help people.
I just want to back up and cover this part again, because that ability to say yes to help that's offered, this does several things. And again, Pete is not the expert, so I'm sure you're going to expand upon it. It's good for you. It's good for your kids. It's also good for the person who's also grieving. It's like, hey, I really want to help you. I know you're in a spot. Here's a casserole. And on Friday, you have to get the hell out of the house because I'm hanging out with your kids or whatever that is. And you've got to say yes, because the community is trying to help you bear that weight.
Yeah. And I mean, I am an introvert. My husband was an introvert, although he was like the life of the party at work. And we didn't have like family or friends. Locally. And so
Mhm.
his coworkers swooped in, and I remember, really just swatting them away at first. And then the supervisor called me and said, "Look, Natasha, these are doers. These were agents. They were like first responders. They were like, give them something to do because they feel hopeless. They don't know what to do to help you." And that invitation of saying, "Oh, I'm going to be helping them,"
Mhm.
it lowered my guard and my pride to say, "Okay." And I mean, and then they swooped in and they really supported me, and it was helpful. But the idea that I was helping them too was enough for me to let that in.
Now let's do your go-getter kid, your daughter that's like, I've made a PowerPoint presentation on, and you're like, okay, I got to keep this kid busy, and that person probably will take care of themselves. But again, you're the parent. You're the only parent. You have to guide them through this. And I know as like a combat vet, a lot of us were like, well, let's see, what can I do today? There are all these 15 trees in my backyard. Maybe I'll just go chop them down by hand, right? Because we had, and by hand I mean like hiya, not with the axe. Like
Yeah.
how do we take on so much work so that I don't have to have the feels? And then also, by the way, let's also cover the demons that come out at night. When you slow everything down. I don't know. I don't
Oh
like
yeah.
slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really rough. I mean, and nighttime sleep is definitely the worst, really disruptive.
Yeah.
I mean, physiologically, your brain is just not on any kind of rhythm. But then all those thoughts and kids have a lot of hard time sleeping too. I mean, my daughter, because their dad technically kind of never woke up, that idea of going to sleep is like a mini death. It's a mini death anyway.
Yeah.
But that's even harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's heavy. A mini death every time you go to sleep, right? And so whatever demons are there, whatever dreams are there, whatever's left that has to be processed, there it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. Um, yeah. How many times can you pull this book out before it becomes, mom, stupid grief rock book, and.
It's a simplistic book. I wish it was like an adult, beautiful art coffee table book. That was really what
Mhm.
I had envisioned
Yeah,
for it.
right.
But it's a kid's book, and I feel like it's one of those books that can just be sitting out there, and
Mhm.
your child doesn't, even if they can't even read yet, they can just look at the pictures and it expresses what the words are. And I purposely had very little words attached to
Mhm.
it. I mean, we can hit kids over the head too much with anything,
Yeah,
including grief. And so giving them tools and then letting it sit. I mean, that's what I did with
yeah,
my kids too. It's like, here's a grief group, here's therapy, here's me, and what's your flavor? What's going to work for you? And then honoring that. I mean, 2 out of my 3 kids were like, nope to the grief group, nope to therapy. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to force it. So you're resentful of help. That's not going to
yeah.
work.
But what if they do need to push into that help and figure out what works for them? And the finding the right therapist, it's not one try oftentimes, it's more tries,
No.
right? So how do you press them into like, hey, this is important, this is hard, we do need to pursue it, but also then not force them into something they don't want to do.
Yeah, I know with my own kids, especially my son, who was like, absolutely not. I mean, he already had social anxiety. So I got that this was uncomfortable. And I said, just go 3 times. And that's what I would also say when I was a therapist and I would try to help parents get their kids into therapy for anxiety or OCD. I said, just try it 3 times. And if you don't like it by the third time, you're good to go. That's fine. We'll talk about other ways we can touch
Mhm.
base and tap into your stuff. But if you're hating it and if you're progressively hating it more each time, that's an
Mhm.
indication it's really not doing what we had hoped it would be doing for you. And so,
Yeah.
but then I would get the commitment. And so he did go 3 times. So he was around other kids who had it. He heard it. It was normalized for him. And so some of that stuff that I wanted him to experience happened with less
Mm.
resistance because he knew that after 3 times he wouldn't have to go again.
When anger and rage show up as part of the process of dealing with those things, and you all of a sudden, as an adult, I can be like, why am I so bad right now? This is everything to do with my grief. And I've got to experience it, got to let it out, but let's not take it out on everybody around me, and trying to find some way to process it. But how do you do that when you identify that possibly in your kid? And then also, how do you know if you're identifying it properly, or if the kid's just having a bad day mentally because they're chemically insane.
Well, either way, I think, like, just getting that anger out is really helpful.
Right.
Grief brings rage. I mean, I had no idea. I mean,
Yeah.
and I was like, I just wasn't one to, like, be angry at, people. I think sometimes people will hook into something or someone, and that's the target of their anger. I was
Yeah.
just angry, and I would angry clean my freezer. Like, I would be throwing things. There would be piles. I don't know what was going on with me. It was really scary. But so I got it on a physiological level that, like, you do that release. And so with my kids, I mean, we've already done this, but I was like, get a bowl of ice and go chuck it in the backyard. Like, get it out. It's not okay to hit us, but if you need to physically have a release, go do that. Go do something.
Mm,
Rip up paper. Go, do something physical. And they would.
yeah.
They would rage in a non-aggressive sort of way.
When you, thankfully, so far, there's always that.
Yeah,
You
knock on
know?
wood.
when when you when you see these grief lessons coming out, how do you also like modulate like, ooh, this is a good talking point. Ooh, this is a teaching moment versus leaving them the heck alone, so that they can also, because a lot of this they are going to sort out for themselves, right?
Yeah, it is a little bit like double Dutch,
Yeah.
roping, like, you gotta know when to come in, you need to know when to get out.
Yeah.
That timing is really important, and each one of my kids is different as far as when they're gonna wanna talk, and my son, like,
Well,
if he doesn't wanna talk, that's not the time to talk, and he'll pick op
uh,
inopportune times to talk, like it's time to go to bed, or, like, we're in a
mm,
dentist office or something, and then he wants to really discuss it. So I think it's realizing it's their time, not my time. So if they're wanting to open up, then I'm gonna have to tap into that, because the
yeah.
door just cracked open and it's about to slam on me, and I'm gonna go in. And then when they slam it and I'm not done yet, that's really frustrating for me as a therapist. I'm like, we're just getting started. But there's clear signs that the conversation is done. I have to respect that, or they'll never open that door again. So
I, I don't know if you're familiar with Judith Rich Harris, who wrote The Nurture Assumption. You familiar with her work at all?
no.
It's so she was physically incapacitated and was a PhD student. Got kicked out by Dean Pete Turner. Right, well, I'll be the bad guy in the story. And part of it was due to her incapacity. Part of it was the fact that she was a woman at Harvard and everything else. Anyhow, so she started writing technical manuals for all of the different disciplines in psychology, and then she started de-siloing and said, oh my gosh, once you account for everything in a kid's life, there's just not much of a role left positively for a parent to impact things, right? And it, like, everybody's rejecting this. But then when you start to look at the external environment and their own genetic wiring and how three kids from the same parents can be all totally different, you start to realize just how small that parental wedge is. And I don't know if that changes at all. By the way, her book was so influential. She won the Dean Pete Turner Award for changing psychology forever. By the way, like the ultimate revenge. But it's interesting when you do think like you can go through all these steps and perform all this work, but man, their friends are going to have a bigger impact in ways that you can't even measure or know.
Yeah, we have I always say we're like one tiny piece of the puzzle, like we're one puzzle piece and there's a huge puzzle, because there
Mm,
are, environmental factors, their peers. Um, you got to pour that foundation early. And then a lot of
yeah,
it is letting go of control on some level, and acceptance of they're not a junior me. Like, they are here with their own journey, their own story. Um, and I'm just one part of their chapter, and I think accepting that has been part of, that's actually been healing for me, because I realize, I mean, I do my part and I want to do my part well, but I also realize that I can't own everything. That child is not just a
mm,
byproduct of my parenting. They're a byproduct of so many things.
yeah, yeah. Well, Judith Rich Harris agrees with you. It
Like,
does take a load off too if you allow it to, like, you know what, a lot of what my kid is going to do and learn is going to be, it's like, I'm looking at my daughter right now. She's over there. I can see her. And she'll say something. And I'm like, that's brilliant. Wow, I didn't teach you that. Where did that come from? Right? It came from the rest of the entire world that,
yeah.
teaches my kid to be the beautiful person that she is.
Yeah. So all those other puzzle pieces for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What did you screw up?
When did I screw up or what did
Yeah,
I screw up?
yeah, what things? Because look, we all make mistakes and we learn from them. So what did you pick up and you're like, "Ooh, too much, too little, not enough, didn't realize." What are those things?
Oh, so many things. I don't know where to start. Definitely with my first daughter, she was the guinea pig. I think I was way too involved in trying to fix things. And so I was very quick at um, telling her what she was doing wrong. Go back and talk to your friend tomorrow and talk about it this way because you obviously offended her that way. And I mean, I think I was right in that I could see the clear picture and she couldn't at that time. And now that she's 20, she'll come back. She'll be like, yeah, I know at that time, but she didn't need to hear that. And so I definitely had to pull back and learn to not give advice and not, just let them. I would
Right.
ask, do you want to hear my opinion? So I think that's been the biggest learning curve for sure.
The book's called The Grief Rock. When there's a parent right now that's going to watch this and they've lost someone or they're going to guide their kids to grief, let's talk to them directly. Why do they need this book? What's it going to help them do?
You know, my child, my youngest has celiac, and so she has to go to the children's hospital at least once a year and to get scoped. And I'm always amazed at like the social worker will come in and will like give her a play by play of this 10-minute procedure. It'll be a 45-minute social work interaction for a 10-minute procedure. And by the time she goes in there, she's calm and she knows what to expect. We're going to put this mask on you. And it's actually almost an enjoyable experience. And I almost feel like my book is similar to that. Not
Mm.
that it's going to be a great experience, but it's like a triage. It's like, let me tell you about this journey you're on or that you're about to go on and show you all the things that are normal. You're going to get squashed by this rock and then people are going to be weird about your rock and you're going to have to hold the rock and eat and sleep. And I that's my hope is that it normalizes that experience not only for your kids but for you that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that this is a common issue with grief."
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it's something you say a lot. As you walk your way through that grief process, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was going to take this long or be this hard, or
Mhm.
I learned this from my kid, or I learned this by study. There's so many of those, oh my gosh, I realized moments. What did you learn from your kid? What did your kids learn from you? Like, what did they come back with lesson wise and said, hey mom, this really helped?
Hmm. These are good questions. You know? And I've had 22 interviews in the last 24 hours, and these are
Yeah.
impressive questions. You're actually making me think. I don't know. I mean, we're 3 years into the journey. I feel like we're still in the middle of it.
Hmm.
About a year into the journey, we decided we were gonna travel the world, and so we have been all over the world in the last 2.5 years, Bali, Hong Kong, Istanbul, all over the world, and I feel like my kids have learned to live in the moment as much as I
Hmm.
can teach a child. We get that we're bigger than this country. We get that we're bigger than this one little problem. I feel like my kids are learning how to live in the moment and realize that we have this moment and we have this moment. Um, and there's a greater appreciation for experience because they realize it could be taken away. So that's my hope at least. I'll let you know what they say um,
Yeah.
in a few years.
Yeah. What what did your husband teach you through grief?
That's a really good question too.
We gotta celebrate him.
I know. I think he taught me that I'm resilient. I
Mm,
almost could feel him cheerleading me, like, "Get
mhm,
up, you can do this."
mhm,
Because he was a caretaker, like to the point where he would leave my toothbrush out at night with toothpaste on it, like a
mhm.
caretaker. Gas in my tank, caretaker. And so after 13 years with him, I felt like I can't drive because he always drove. I can't travel by myself because he always navigated us. He always kept me safe. And so um, I feel like there's this whisper of uh, you are powerful and you can do this. And slowly over time, I'm believing that.
We don't have to get specifics. I'm not trying to make you reveal anything, but what did you get really upset with your husband about? Because
I
there's gonna
actually
be things.
offended. I know. Well, there was a lot. You know, and that's the thing. I think relationships. when there's sudden death, and I'm 51, he was 42 at the time. This was 3 years ago, so he's younger than me. But I feel like it's like someone just slams that book in the middle of a chapter, and
Mm,
relationships are messy. So, one, you're dealing with a lot of residual, unresolved relationship issues because you're like, someone just slammed the book shut, and we were like in the middle of a conversation.
mm,
Um, but I think the other thing, and I actually see my daughter was struggling with this too, is feeling like he chose to leave. I think death is so irrational that there was this thought of like, how could your soul leave me? There was
right.
anger that his soul even agreed to leave, on a
Yeah.
spiritual level, and that I had to come to peace with, that
Mm,
this is the way it was meant to be, and I had to come to some peace with that and not be angry at him for leaving or for not being aware of like his symptoms or being too proud to, go to the ER when I was like, "Do you need to go to the ER?" And there was a lot to to put to put down and not hold anymore.
yeah. Yeah. And, and as gone as they are, like when you grab the toothbrush or the toothpaste and you realize he's never going to squeeze this again. He didn't finish this toothpaste. I'm always fascinated by the pickle jar in someone's fridge. And like they're
Mhm.
never going to finish these four pickles, and it's just so permanent, right? But then again, they're also everywhere. They're in a sunrise, they're in a gull floating on the air, they're, the conversations that you still have, they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. That presence is everywhere, and keeping him alive in having him just be part of our conversation
Mm,
with my kids all the time, that so they're still learning about their dad, telling them stories as they're getting older. And yeah, I do see him everywhere. And for a while that was so painful because I could hear him in my head because he was such a funny
mhm.
guy. I could hear his sarcasm. He was narrating everything I was doing. It's become more comforting now over time because I've gotten used to that and feeling like he's definitely not gone. And he's just part of the fabric of who we are right now.
Yeah, yeah. How do you, as a parent, amplify that so that the kids can? Because again, you don't know where they're at, what they can realize, what you get at a level 3 versus a level 10 that you can only get even at a level 25 when you're older. And there's that aging, that sweetness, that seasoning that we all get.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're still kind of in the thick of it.
Hmm.
I am finding that there is, and I saw this with my own parents. Like my mom died at 59, so young, and there's a pedestal that you can kind of have that all of a sudden this artificial pedestal comes out, and all of a sudden they're kind of godlike. And I didn't want that for my kids. I wanted them to really see their dad as human. And so I'm finding, because they, now they're 3 years older, like I'll share stuff and sometimes they're not perfect stories. Sometimes I'll talk about things that we argued about, or things that, it's nice that I'm driving now because dad never let me drive and I didn't realize how like
Hmm.
incapacitating that was, and giving them a full flavor idea of who he was, because I want them to know all the dimensions of them. And I also don't want them to have this false sense of this superhero person that's not human. And you have to do that at different developmental stages because there's certain information that they're not ready for, and then as they get older, they'll learn more. Not
Yeah.
that there's a lot of hidden dark secrets, but just the depth of a human and what they can hold.
Yeah. But sometimes there are hidden dark secrets. Maybe not in the case with you guys, but there are, loved ones that go and you're like, oh, they had this whole other part of them that was completely private and not something that anybody would be proud of, but we all have these things, right? Or whatever it is. And having to reckon with that and forgive about something that they didn't even, you know, get a chance to ever be open about, if they ever even needed to, right? But that's a real thing when you do whatever it is, when you go through the effects and all these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, there is this whole other, part of this person that was strictly for them.
Yeah, and it's probably good for us to know that that will happen to all of us, that
Right.
they will
Yeah.
go through all your stuff. So if you
Yeah.
drop dead, everything's gonna be gone through. It's just like, just a little, I mean, because it's one of those things that, like, you're desperate for information, you're desperate for some
Mhm.
connection, and so, I did go through his stuff with a fine-tooth comb. Like, there was something, like, there was an itch I was trying to scratch, like, I wanted to find something or make sense of something or feel like I knew fully him, or my anxiety was driving it too. Like, what if you find something that's going to be upsetting? He was squeaky clean, thankfully, because I don't think I could have handled it. But more often than not, you're going to find stuff, people's texts. I mean, you can go down a dark hole. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then, we're all messy and we're all human.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple more things I want to bring up, because it's it's the one chance we get to talk about this stuff without making it a giant case. Like you said, it's so hard to talk about. My advice normally is when someone gets hit with a grief moment like this, just to slow down. Like we're so desperate to do things, but there's just no need to rush. That person's still going to be dead in 2 hours. They're still going to be dead after you go to the bank. Still going to be dead after you call the medical examiner's office to get that damn death certificate. That's only going to come at the speed that it comes at. There's all
Mhm.
these things. Just slow down. And the other thing, this is just my rule of thumb, is that people suck at people dying. And so
Mhm.
people are, especially in the family, they're going to act horrible to one another. And I'm not saying you have to take abuse, but I am saying you might want to give grace, because, gosh, people are just so bad and we will be too, right? You'll
Mhm.
do things you're like, no, I shouldn't have done that, whatever. But do you have any rules of thumb? And what are your thoughts about my rules of thumb? Can you add to my list? Because I want to get better at this stuff.
Yeah, I do think that that is so true. I mean, your brain stops working. And so give yourself some time to repair,
Yeah.
because it's in crisis mode. You feel that on a physical level. And so space is really important. And now I can't handle not having space. Like, I really, like, my brain needs the space. And I used to worry, and I have a relative who will be like, keep her phone next to her bed, just in case, one of her adult kids is having a crisis and she needs to deal with it. And I've had this attitude now where I'm like, they'll find me. And you're right. I think, like, nothing's going to change. They'll treat somebody and they'll give them emergency care if they need to, but I don't there's no rush in anything. And certainly when grief is involved and you've already passed the trauma, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of bureaucratic stuff that's going to happen. You can get really obsessed about it. Um, Being a government employee, oh boy, like a pile of paperwork. It was a nightmare. It took about a year and a half. And
Yeah.
having that
Yeah.
attitude of whatever, you know,
Hmm.
this is a process and I'm not gonna sweat it. I think that is really good advice. I think the other thing is being humble enough to accept help, because uh, pride isn't gonna really save you. It's and,
Yeah.
and it does help them. And so I think being humble enough to take help is a big one, because you're not an island.
That's powerful advice, because there's a person at the FBI whose job is to guide you through this process. And I'm saying, there's probably a whole department of people like, don't forget this, don't forget that.
There
And
is
you
the
say,
whole
hey,
department.
yeah, I cannot handle this. And they're like, of course, that's why we're here. Let us help you. And so that help is there. And also in your friend group, there's going to be someone around you who's like, I'm an expert in people dying.
Yeah.
Here's how we do that, and just listen to them. And if there's not, become that person. Get the book. It's right there. There's the link.
Yep.
The other thing, again, closing out administratively, is the other topic I wanted to bring up is, gosh, we are reluctant to have wills and trusts,
Mhm.
and I'm not trying to sell anybody any insurance, but understanding what these things are, and making decisions and improving, so that when the inevitable does happen, someone who's there to care for your things and your people can open that book and say, who cares what song they play at your funeral? Like, administratively, have you been a good parent? Have you taken the burden off of your kids? Because guess what? It's already really hard. Someone dies, and I don't know
Yeah.
why we are so reluctant as a society to handle our affairs. We'll do so many other things great, invest our money for our retirement, everything else. But boy, oh boy, if you ask people, do you have a will and trust? Are your parents, how are your parents, affairs? Are they in order? Because if they're not, it's
It's a
horrible.
mess. It's a mess, and it is the best gift you can give your loved ones, because you have to think, if I drop dead right now, will people be able to pay my bills? Will they
Hmm.
be able to log into bank accounts? Are there, next line kin, identified in your bank accounts? I mean, the bureaucracy I had to deal with was, and my husband knew, he was in the line of work that he could have been shot at any time. And so, like, we have this awareness that death could be part of his job. And
Hmm.
the car was not in my name. The mortgage was not in my name. So
So
that was
many things.
a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah.
Certainly did not have a will. A lot of like stuff that he had before me, he had not identified the next of kin. And so
Yeah.
even his bank account, he paid all the bills through the bank account and I didn't have his login. And eventually I did learn how to hack that, on his iPad and I got it. And the bank closed everything and said, nope, he's dead. So we're closing it. And I couldn't pay the bills because they were all on bill pay through the bank account. So having these thoughts, if you love somebody, have these thoughts and think, is it seamless? Now there
Yeah.
is literally a folder, by my safe that has all the passwords, all the information.
Yeah.
There's a will, get it all tied up. It took me a day to do, and no one will wonder anything if I were to die right now.
Yeah. And this is the slow down advice. You don't have to tell the bank the second, hey, Jeff's dead.
Yeah.
Like, slow down.
Yes. And
You
I did
may
that too
need to act.
fast. I did it too fast, and then they closed his bank account, and
Right.
that
Yeah.
actually screwed me.
Yeah. It's okay. You are not committing. Look, I'm not. No one should commit a crime, but you're not committing a
Mhm.
crime by going
No.
in to your husband's account and saying, "Here's how we're going to pay the bills," or it's
Yeah.
we get so spun up to do things. It's slow down.
Yeah.
It's really complicated. Like the phone. Whose name is on the phone account. Now I have to get this transferred over, and these are
Yeah.
challenging phone calls anyhow. And then it gets administratively hard. Oh my gosh, it's crazy all the different things that you have to deal with the passing of someone. What
Yeah.
I don't want to keep it too much longer, but what else do you want to cover that we haven't covered?
I think that we're really comprehensive. These are really good questions.
I love that. I love that. Everybody should get this book. Anytime you can get better at dealing with grief, I think it's a good thing. And that train stays on the track and you're just on the ride, but having an
Yeah.
idea what normal is and being able to guide your friends and your family and your kids, I just think it's invaluable. And I really thank you for writing this book and having this great conversation with me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Anything in closing before I wrap it up?
Nope, I appreciate you.
All right, likewise. I'm going to run these credits. Stay around and I'll say goodbye to you properly.
Um,
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank